Aloha and welcome to this screencast in which I want to describe to you the play-example-fluentlenium package. This is a very simple play example application. It's basically the Hello World application that you get by default when you create a new play application in the console, and I've just slightly modified it so you get a sense for how you use the FluentLenium testing package with it. So if you go to the home page for this package, you can see this is a little screenshot. Basically, there's a very simple form with a text field and a pull-down menu, and we're going to test this page by using FluentLenium to fill in the name field and select one of the gender items, and then test to make sure that the page that comes back afterwards has the right values. So the key points for FluentLenium is that you don't have to install anything. It's just there available for you when you use Play. It has this notion of the page object pattern where you create a class file, one class file for each page that you want to test in your application, and you put the behavior associated with any given page in that class file. And so it makes your tests more modular and easy to understand. So I use that pattern in this sample code. One thing, if you're new to testing, it's really useful to always have the ID attribute in your HTML elements. That way it becomes very easy when you write tests for FluentLenium or any other CSS or HTML parser to find the right thing to actually modify. If you're using DivShot or JetStrap or some of these layout packages, they're not going to put IDs in for you automatically, so you want to remember to do that. And then I have, in addition to the page object pattern, which encapsulates the behavior associated with a given page in a FluentLenium appropriate format, there's also another file called integrationtest.java that shows how you actually write a test case. So there's really only two files that are in this package that show how FluentLenium works. And then it's good to go to this page here, the documentation page for FluentLenium, which gives you, it's very well written documentation, and you can scroll through it and see lots of examples of how you do parsing of a given page and select various items from it. Okay, so that's where you want to go for more details on things. This is just kind of the skeleton thing. So what you basically want to do, which I forgot to kind of set up for myself here, is after you've downloaded this and installed it, you can, for example, if you're in this package, play-example-fluentlenium, you can say play, and that will bring up the play environment associated with this package. And then the first thing to do is just to type test, which means we're going to invoke these FluentLenium based tests on the system and just make sure that passes. This was developed using Play 2.1, so hopefully it'll still work for you when you get around to trying it out. The other thing you can do is you can say run, and then you can go into your browser and you can go to localhost. Okay, and then you get the actual example, and then it's kind of just to understand how the application is actually set up to work. You type in a name, and then, well, let's type in a different name like Jenna, and then we're going to select Jenna's gender as female, and we click submit, and then what happens is we redisplay the same page with the values from the last submission in the actual page itself. And so we're going to use that behavior to actually do the testing. Okay, so let's go back to here, get rid of that, and then let me now do a quick walkthrough of the code, which means, doggone it, there we go. Okay, so what we can see is that just like the Hello World application, we just have one controller called application.java, and this has two methods associated with it, a display method and a submit method. The display method is simply going to display that page, the index page with the form and these kind of default values for the last form submission values because nobody submitted any data yet. And then the submit method is what gets the data, the form data after it's been posted, and basically it's going to bind the data to an instance of this person class and then render the same page, this index page, with the form and the values that we retrieved from the request, which is the person's name and gender. Okay, so to make that a little more clear, we'll bring up this, and you can see that there's a get and a post. Those are the two methods implemented. The get method is going to do the display, and the post method will go to submit. Our model class, nothing interesting here. It's just a basic model with a name and a gender. Okay, and then if we go to views, we've got the basic index and Scala pattern that happens in the default application, and what we're interested in here is the index.main.scala, which takes two values, takes this person form, and then takes two strings, which is going to show the last values found from the form. And we call the main with index. This is just, we don't really need to have a main program for this, but I just wanted to perturb the default example, the hello world example, as little as possible. And what you can see here is we're going to use the form helper. We're going to invoke that submit method when the form is submitted. And you can see we have one ID that's called name and another ID called gender for these two fields. And then we below that we're going to write out the last name retrieved from the form and the last gender retrieved from the form. Okay, so super simple. The things to notice here really is just that for all of our form elements, and this is true for HTML elements in general, we're going to have this ID tag to make things simple. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is let's look at the integration test, which is very slightly modified from the default example. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a test server, run on 3333. We're going to use HTML unit. We're going to use the fake in-memory database. Of course, we don't even use a database here, but we'll keep that the same. And then we'll have this new callback test browser with an invoke method. We're going to pass in the test browser. And then we're going to do this page object pattern thing, which is creating an instance of the index page. Okay, so you see index.scala.html here, and then in this pages subdirectory, we have an indexpage.java. So apart from this main, which is kind of a template wrapper, the general idea, if you're using this page object pattern, is that for each of your other pages or view files, in your application, you're going to have a corresponding Java class that implements, that provides a representation for that page in kind of FluentLenium land. So we create this index page, and then we say, the code is fairly self-documenting, right? We're going to use the browser object to go to that index page. We're going to have two strings, a name and a gender. And then we're going to invoke the submit form method from this index page, passing it the name and gender that we want to have in the form. That all makes sense. And then we're going to assert that the page source of the browser where we are now contains last gender plus the gender that we passed in. So this is our way of kind of verifying that the submission worked. A new page was displayed on that new page that provides the last data submitted in the form. We're going to have it. Okay, so hopefully that's really easy to follow. And part of the reason why it's really easy to follow is because we have this page object which is going to abstract out the details of the behavior of a given page. And so this is the kind of the neat thing, the special sauce for FluentLenium that I think is pretty cool, which is this page object pattern. So it could go anywhere, but I like having a little subdirectory called pages inside test where you just put all those pages and then they're kind of away from the actual tests themselves. You're not mixing them all in. So we've got this index page. It's supposed to extend this Fluent page thing. You need to have a URL, and that's passed in the constructor. You pass in the WebDriver, and it turns out that really all you need to do is pass in the port and then you can construct the URL because, at least in my world, HTTP localhost will always get you to the page that's being used for testing. And then you're going to override a method called getURL to return this value of the string you've constructed in the constructor. You also need to override a method called isAt, which is a method used to make sure that you're at the page that you want to be at. And we do this simply in this case, by saying that each page is going to have a unique title. The title of the index page is going to be index. And so an easy way to verify that we're at the page that we want it, we're at this particular page, is just by checking the title. So you may have some different way of figuring out whether you're at the page you want to be at, but that's one way to do it. And then we have the specialized behavior associated with this page. In this case, I'm calling it submit form, but you could have your own method. We're not overriding anything. You can have as many of these things as you want based upon all the different behaviors that are possible from this page. And in this case, we're going to pass in a name and a gender. And then we've got two examples of this FluentLenium API. We're going to fill the field whose ID is name with the name string. Okay, so that should be pretty easy because there's the pound sign there. It's going to look for an ID. And then we've got this other one where we're going to say we're going to find the select element whose ID is equal to gender. Okay, so actually if we kind of go look here, you can see here's the select field, its ID is gender, and then what do we do next? We're going to find an option with the text equal to gender. So inside this, inside this select item we have these option fields, and so now we're going to look for an option fields whose value is equal to whatever we passed in, male or female. And then how does it say? And then we're going to click that one, okay? So which will effectively select it, okay? And then finally, we're going to submit the form with the ID equal to submit. So we go back here and we see submit, or the input field of type submit, whose ID is submit. So we're going to basically invoke that, which is going to invoke the post. That's going to go route it to the controller, invoke the submit method, redisplay the page, and we're all good. Okay? I think that's all you need to know to understand how to use FluentLenium with Play. If you have questions, you can contact me, or even better, you can contact the developer of FluentLenium package, post an issue. She's been extremely helpful and responsive as I've worked through my own questions with respect to FluentLenium. So you'll get a lot of high quality help from her. I think this package is pretty awesome, and I hope you use it.